So I have the privilege of working with VMD, BEMA, fashion, cinema, and of course, photography students. Today, we have a wonderful, wonderful panel lined up for you, but a few housekeeping items beforehand. Number one, bathrooms are outside. Please exit quietly. I ask that you please turn your phones off or put them on silent, as well as please don't use any technology during the panel. As a friendly reminder, we are videotaping, so I ask you to be mindful for sound. You all should have received note cards. Anyone not received a note card? Okay, excellent. Those note cards are for you to write down questions to ask our panelists in the second half of our session. Okay, so what's going to happen is I'm going to ask some questions of these wonderful wonderfuls for about 45 minutes. We're going to take a 15-minute break. You're going to give me your note cards. I'm going to sift through the note cards looking for themes, and then I'm going to ask them the questions that kind of represent those buckets. Does that make sense? Cool. And then we'll come back and I'll ask your questions. We ready to rock and roll? Yeah. All right. So, panelists, let's start with the infamous question. Tell us about yourself.
Hello.
So
Testing.
That's just for audio for the video. It's not.
I don't need to actually use it. Okay.
Just project.
I like that. My name is Christine Wolheim, and I am a food and prop stylist for still photography and motion sometimes, most often still.
My name is Nader Khouri. I'm a food and lifestyle photographer here in the city. And sometimes I put director. These days it's, we're being asked to do motion projects. So although I'm not like, first and foremost a director, I have directed some advertising projects. So maybe in the next couple of years I'll be doing a lot more, who knows, but yeah, that's, do you want me to go further, or is that good?
Whatever you want to start out with, that's
yeah, I mean, I can talk about for
we'll dive deep, that's
okay.
Great. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Scott Davis, and I work at Airbnb. I am a digital content manager and title for the art department. Airbnb has its own internal creative sort of agency of sorts. And by digital content manager, I'm more or less just a digital librarian, digital asset manager. I have a background in librarianship and digital collections. So I'm very much more on sort of the technical angle of handling massive amounts of files and assets and all the systems that kind of work for your cloud solutions and local solutions for a lot of creative assets. Because we do video, we do photography, we do everything you can basically imagine for marketing purposes, brand, and just product stuff for the business. And that's what I got.
Thank you, panelists. So I want to take a moment and acknowledge that Alexi and Josh, who were originally going to be on the panel, unfortunately couldn't make it because the gigs came up, right? So it's the life of a freelancer, and we're super stoked to have these wonderful panelists here. So what I always find is really effective, panelists, is to kind of start at the origin story, right? Because every superhero has like a birth moment, right? I would love if you could please share with the studio audience, what did you want to be when you were younger? Right? I know when I was younger, I wanted to be Indiana Jones, right? I wanted to be an archaeologist because I love those films. What about you?
Can you go first?
You go first.
Okay. Well, I always knew that I wanted to be an artist, actually. And when I was 14, I pestered the local chef at this very fine French restaurant. I pestered him because I got it into my head that I wanted to work there. He said, no, you can't, no, you're too young. And the person that he hired for this one particular summer broke her arm on 4th of July, and so he came by my house, a small community. He came by my house and said, you still want to work? So that started my career as a chef. By the time I was 19, I was sous chef. By the time I was 21, I was executive chef. And that was a career that lasted, I really, really loved it because it was a very multi-dimensional, really interesting, just the possibilities of what could be done with this medium was incredible. And America was still a little bit in the dark ages. The only kind of food that was really happening was very haute cuisine. Those were the kind of restaurants I worked in. Like the revolution hadn't happened for the everyday restaurants yet. And so it was just kind of a mind-blowing medium for me. But after about 20 years, at the ripe age of 30, I began to be kind of disenamored with the business itself and not having any free time, basically working 80 hours a week for my whole life. I decided that I wanted to approach art making in a less ephemeral kind of way, and the whole time I was always drawing and painting and making stuff, and so I decided I wanted to kind of go through the front door. So when I was about, I don't know, in my mid-30s, I came back to this country. I had been working overseas in Italy, and I came back to this country and went to art school. I went to the San Francisco Art Institute, where I studied painting, and that was amazing. And then when I graduated, I went, oh, I still need to get a job. So, I put myself through school working in restaurants, of course, and then when I got out, I was just kind of looking for pickup work. I'd done like all the iterations of cooking, from catering to, I was a private chef right after school, and I started assisting food stylists, and I wasn't thinking of it as a career at that time, but it was increasingly interesting to me. And even though I had all that experience as a chef, being a food stylist is a completely different thing. Well, not completely different, but it's very different. The pace and what you're looking for and how you approach it and how it is visually for the camera is very different than how it is for consumption of a person in real life. And so there was a lot to learn, and there was a lot to learn and the way that you set something up for a two-dimensional image is really interesting perspective-wise. And I began to get really interested in what the prop stylists were doing, like the surface and the linens and the plates, the ceramics and all these different textures. And so then I began an apprenticeship with prop stylists as well. And for me, because I had worked with food for so long, it wasn't as exciting. I got really excited when I started working with all the materials. And that's when you really have an opportunity to create the whole environment. It seemed more creative to me because you're really affecting the look and the feel. Whereas with food, it's either right or not right. Or it's either loose or tight, or, And with the props, there's just, again, an inordinate amount of things that you can do. And so I still do both. I do food and props, but I have a large collection of props now. It also dovetailed into my hobby of thrift store shopping and flea markets and again, just like I said about textures. And so I have a 1,500 square foot warehouse of just different surfaces, like tabletops, and some of them I make, some of them I bind, some of them I alter, and a ton of ceramics and plates and dishes and pots and of all different kinds, as well as utensils and boards and so I draw on these every time I get a job. I will pull from what I have that can be useful for that job. It usually still entails some shopping to augment what is actually needed, or what I might have to make something. Anyway, I'm diverging from the origin story, but there we go.
She's also a very accomplished painter.
I still paint.
So growing up, like in high school, I was very much into sports, and I didn't really, believe it or not, think much about or care much about what I was going to do with my life. I tried to, get decent grades, but I just was like soccer, basketball, baseball. That's all I really cared about. And went to Chico State my first 2 years, and did a lot of partying. And but one time when I was visiting on my second year, visiting back, I grew up here in the Bay Area. Did I say that already? And my mother had this book called The Artist's Way. I don't know if any of you have heard of it, but I basically like stole it from her, and it changed my life. So my family's, I'm first generation here, and it's kind of like, going to be a doctor or an engineer, or, that kind of path. And it was like, it went from that to like, do whatever the heck you want if you love it. So it opened a lot of doors for me and made me dabble in all kinds of things. I not just like arts, but like philosophy, and I actually took a music theory class, and I was like, this isn't for me. I love listening to music, but and then my father passed away when I was a kid, and he left this old Minolta camera, and I took it back up to Chico with me and took a class, and the teacher's like, oh, it's broken. I didn't even know. I didn't even care about taking pictures. Like growing up, I'd never even had picked up a point and shoot even. But all of a sudden, like, the world of photography just like was so interesting to me.
So what, did you have a light leak? Was it broken like that?
I don't even know. I honestly, something
You
with the
these
shutter
really
or
interesting
something.
artistic images.
No, it didn't even work. Like,
Okay.
I took it to get it fixed, and then
I
it said it was too expensive to fix. And so yeah, I just picked up what's it called? What's the magazine called? American Photography, and they had this issue where it was like landscapes and photojournalism and fashion and all kinds of stuff. And there was this little girl in there with a cigarette in her mouth. She wasn't even 10 years old, and started seeing all these photojournalism pictures that really I connected with. And next thing I knew, I transferred back to San Francisco State and studied in their journalism department, photojournalism. I'll just make the rest of this short. I studied photojournalism, and I worked in the East Bay at a newspaper for almost 10 years, and sort of got burnt out, and went back to the drawing board. And what do I love? And it was food, healthy living, and I think that for me was kind of, I learned to make my career personal, like the things that I care about, to actually translate that into my career. So, I love photography. I wanted to stay in photography, and so I was able to kind of just switch gears, and I'm sure I can talk more, but that's good for now.
For me, I was born and raised in the kind of Los Angeles area, the northern part of the San Fernando Valley. And I would probably say I was always kind of like, I had appeals to art. I was always very sensitive to like kind of things that were, museums, galleries, like digital media, all sorts of stuff like that. But I understood very early on I had no talent for it myself. I could never be like a true creative. I dabbled in creative writing and whatnot, and also realized I couldn't really fashion a story or something like that. But I was always just like, I would keep journals, and I was the type of person, I would read like just ferociously, but I would also just keep spreadsheets and indexes of everything I wanted to like just try to remember, because I just couldn't be bothered to keep it all in my own head. And that came down to the music I listened to, everything like that. And after I finished my undergrad doing like literature degrees and writing and foreign languages, I ended up in the Bay Area, and I worked at a book publishing company. And it was kind of, the emphasis was photo history books. And then I just found myself just doing basically scanning and digitizing book layout and just all the sort of production work that would come into creating little tiny coffee table books. And after a few years and just kind of doing like side projects, I was just the sort of nerd where I would volunteer my time and effort when I got to use the scanner from my book publishing office. I did the whole family digitization project of scanning 30 years worth of photography and getting it onto hard drives, creating more or less a digital collection for our entire family's worth of VHS tapes and photography. And it was like, you know what, this is kind of obvious. I'm just sort of this organizational sort of person. And I started to think, the book publishing job was not going to last forever, and I was thinking, what do I need to do with my life? And I wanted to consider getting a master's degree. So I enrolled at the University of Illinois, Urbana-Champaign, and I got a master's in library information science. I did a course kind of track of data curation, digital collections, databases, and that was 2 amazing years of just being around like students who were also just fervently, you know, passionate about the tenets of information organization and just the things that librarians want to do in the world in terms of just building knowledge and sharing. And when I finished my program and degree, I thought I'm going to end up in some awesome archive. I'm going to be working for the Kronos Quartet collection in like San Francisco. And instead I ended up in e-commerce, working to make potterybarn.com happen. And then after, you know, in that job, I got to just start collaborating with the in-house photo studio that just produces all those assets that end up on a web page, that end up in a catalog, marketing stuff. And I just had to do a lot of like sort of higher profile, over glorified data entry. Now you can call it metadata, you can call it all of that sort of stuff. And just helping to funnel massive amounts of just assets going in their digital asset life cycle. What's created, get it to the end result. I tried to convince myself the best I could that a commerce web page is a digital library with just a shopping cart component to it in the end, and you can still have like an engaging and lovely experience, but it is just sort of in the service of e-commerce. And then I ended up doing that at Walmart.com of all places, which was also a very much, it was a larger operation, new challenges, new things like that. But you also just you get to work with, at least in my discipline, lots of interesting things that try to automate and just flow things through, because we still need people to do stuff and to be aware of things, but there's just so much volume nowadays. You need all the tools you can get. And while I was working at Walmart, just this one day, I got a phone call to say, hey, would you be interested in joining, you know, Airbnb? They have this like in-house digital asset management platform. I will probably refer to it as DARRL. It stands for the Digital Asset Repository You Love. And so on DARRL, it is an operations tool. It is like your own in-house stock photography website. And then being able to join this team, and like I've been with them now for 2.5 years, I get to put to work everything in terms of librarianship, curating assets and imagery that's produced by our own in-house art department, and all of the photographers and videographers and artists who create all the assets that go into our entire kind of global aesthetic. And in there, you just try to just do the best practices of your discipline, user feedback responses, and it's just all about, you know, collaboration, transparency, and just trying to do, you know, get to the best ends for like what you're involved in. And so I feel really lucky that I've kind of ended up where I feel I naturally should be, and that was after many years of just kind of doing jobs where you did feel repetition in a way that can grade you down and just kind of feel like you're getting burnt out, where you just kind of get into this kind of cycle of things. But just know that, you know, with each job, like some things, I would quit a job, something would just end because the economy went to complete ruin in 2008. Yeah. So there's gonna be a lot of unknowable outcomes and things that you just can't control. But just always, like, you know, for every time I came across things, it was like curiosity, knowing what can I do, what's available to me here, tools and things. Because something you learn at one job will then become very relevant maybe 2 years later when there's like a system or something where you've already gone through 80% of the learning curve, and then people will think you're just a knowledge expert, and suddenly you've got some job security. So lots of fun stuff. You know, things can just work out over the long run without you even intending it necessarily.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, panelists. I really appreciate that really robust, quick recap of yourselves. That was wonderful. The major themes that I kind of gleaned from the panelists, I kind of like to do this too long, didn't listen, recap after every answer. Curiosity will always take you to the right place, right? Every experience will prepare you for the next experience, right? I heard that in Christina and Scott's response. And I think play. That was another major theme that I heard amongst all of your panelists, so thank you. Christine, you kind of covered this for us. I would love to hear from Nader and Scott. What was your first non-photography job? Non-photography job.
Non-photography. I mean, you're saying even when I was 16?
Yeah.
Oh,
especially when you're
my
16.
first job ever was as a busboy.
Let's hear about it.
Yeah, I mean, I turned 16 and my mother helped me out a little bit to buy a car, and I had to pay for my car, and my sister actually got me a job at this restaurant she worked at as a busboy. And I think 3 weeks after getting my car, I got my license suspended. I was just driving 60 and a 35, what a big deal. But yeah, great job. I learned a lot. Had fun. I accidentally ended up getting to drink during their Christmas party and drinking a little too much. What else? I mean, not much to it. Yeah, that's the only kind of food-based job I've actually ever worked in. I've never been a chef or anything, but yeah.
Okay. Thank you. Scott?
I'd probably say, when I was in middle school, I somehow ended up, and I don't know if I volunteered for this, but there was a little, hole-in-the-wall window where you could buy candy at lunch hour or snack break. And I think I had this idea to be this Willy Wonka magical world where I would get to have all the stores of Sour Patch Kids and whatnot. And I soon learned just when you had to work the window, and I'm the tiny little kid, who's just and in middle school, and there's all the other big kids, and just you learn to just get as sharp as possible because people just come up and claim, oh, I paid for that already. They want to try to shortchange you, and you just you start to learn all the tactics and manipulation and things that can happen. And something as low stakes as selling a candy bar, but you start to reveal lots of just sort of human interaction and contact. And it was kind of a delightful year to spend doing that thing, but I don't miss it, obviously. But beyond that, all throughout high school, aside from just doing side hustles of babysitting and yard work and stuff like that, and just vacuuming the house, having to just do my own keep at home to get my my allowance, I did work at a video store that my older brother worked at, and he would let me get free rentals so long as I did his job for him. But that meant I could actually get just stacks of VHS tapes. And then when I turned 16, I immediately got a job at our local just sort of megaplex movie theater. And that just meant I could go to all the current cinema day one, sometimes see things early. I got to see Star Wars Episode 1 3 weeks early. And it was just a delightful job to have because I was in it just to get exposure to just films and special movie screenings and getting to learn the projectionists and watching stuff after hours, on your own terms. Just getting to meet just different people from every walk of life, at a job like that.
That's awesome. Middle school students, they don't play, do they?
No.
They're treacherous sometimes. Selling that candy. Awesome. Thank you, panelists. If you could please share with the studio audience, tell us about your first photography gig, right? So who was it for? What was the context, right? How did it go down? Just I would love to hear that first time you started doing this and it felt official in a way.
You can go.
Well, I mean, in my journal, my first gig in journalism was when I was in Chico. Just still such a beginner. The school newspaper gave me my first shot, and I had 2 assignments, and it like was the biggest thing in the world to me, like to see my images published in the, it's called the Orion, and yeah, it was like, it was such a great, you know, feeling to, you know, it's such an accomplishment, you know, yeah, I mean, in terms of my commercial career, that's a good question. I can't exactly remember. I mean, one of my first most proudest jobs as a commercial photographer was when I shot this restaurant in San Francisco. It's not there anymore, but it was an Italian restaurant on Mission Street, and just a little bit about kind of me transitioning from being photojournalist, from like covering like catastrophes and, you know, hard news and, you know, fun stuff as well, like sporting events and concerts and things. But from going from that to like shooting food, well, actually, when I was a photojournalist, it was like, food to me was a waste of time. If you asked me to go shoot a restaurant, I was like, there's so much happening in the world. You want me to go? You think I care about that this matters to like a restaurant review? But anyhow, going into restaurants was great because it allowed me to photograph people, but also do food at the same time. So let me kind of stay a little bit in that world of people, and now it's still to this day. I'm food and lifestyle, where I do a lot of like tabletop food, but also, you know, food as it pertains to people and people experiencing food and cooking it, all that. So.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I've never had a photography job, so I'll sit this one out.
I remember my first one now, because you know, as an assistant to food stylist, you're preparing a lot of things that are used on set. So there was a lot of that going on. But my first job, where I was solo on my own, was for Sierra Magazine, and it was a shoot for green business. And so I had to find the perfect briefcase, and the idea was a plant coming out of it. But I was having a hard time figuring out how I was going to get the plant to stay up in there. You know, I had to pull it out of the pot. So I went down to the beach and I gathered some sand and I put it in bags, plastic bags, and I stuffed the briefcase with that. And I came to set, and the photographer, and I started setting up, and I pulled out these bags with sand, and she just started cracking up. She's like, "You made your own sandbags?" Like, the sandbags it's a very common thing that people in photo studios have on set, you know? And I didn't know. So I just, it was a good idea. I wish I had invented it for real.
Okay, thank you, panelists. That was wonderful.
Mm-hmm.
What would you share with the studio audience about what's the most important non-technical skill to have? So I like to call them interpersonal skills or life skills, right? To be successful in the world of photography.
Creative problem solving.
Like making your own sandbag?
Yes.
Excellent.
Yeah. Flexibility.
Yeah, I think it's really, I think knowing your client and listening and that curiosity and asking questions to really, like, as much as possible, get deeper into the brand, because I think the more you can, you're almost like a journalist, where you're learning about them and trying to find out. I mean, some of this is corny, but like the essence of the brand. And I always try as much as possible to apply a lot of those journalism skills to my commercial jobs, where you know, advertising can be very formal and oftentimes fake and posed, and so there's always that kind of balance between you want things to feel real and authentic, yet in advertising sometimes that real and authentic can be too real, like too messy. So that's kind of always the kind of thing I'm trying to discuss with clients about finding that nice balance, and they seem to appreciate it. And so, yeah, just the good communication stuff.
And if I may ask a follow-up question, sometimes I find, I myself who work with artists, right? I don't know what my brand is or what my essence is, right? Do you have any tips for the studio audience on like how to leverage, like you were talking about your photojournalism experience? What are some questions or things that you kind of plant in the mind of your clients that help kind of get them to talk about their brand or think about their brand if they've never thought about it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, I think it's, they can find a lot of it within, like, just taking a look at themselves. You know what I'm saying? So it's, or taking a look at whatever their target demographic is. Meaning, like if you're a food brand and you want to target a certain kind of customer. I'm trying to think of some examples, but
I have something to say.
Yeah.
I find that visuals are really, really helpful.
Mm-hmm.
You can have a conversation for a really long time and still maybe not be on the same page, but as we're setting about to work with clients to make an end product as a visual thing, if they haven't, if there's not an agency and their art directors, et cetera, if they haven't given you a visual board, it's great to give them a visual board or to, pull some things and ask them, like, what do you like about this picture? What do you not like? Is this texture too rough for you? Is this lighting too harsh for you? Is this, you start the conversation there, because even getting them to say no to something is just as valuable as having them say yes. And you really don't want to be on set shooting and that's where they're figuring out what they want and they're saying no. Like, in my case with props, like, oh, well, just bring alternatives and we'll decide then. And that's really dangerous because it's just a torturous day with them, like, oh, let's look at that, let's look at, and then they say no to 10 things, but you've created double the work for yourself. So it really is great to have that deeper conversation, like Nader saying beforehand, and I find that using visuals is really helpful.
At Airbnb, because I help with onboarding photographers who they've already kind of done, like, we have departments that go out and recruit and identify, and then people who kind of fit in with sort of the kind of baseline aesthetic that they feel is best with the brand. But for every single shoot, there's either, you can call it many things. You can call it a marketing brief. You can call it just like the photographer's playbook. You can call it our in-house style photo guidelines. So there's a lot of just visual communication about how we need, like, when they want somebody to go out and to bring back about 1,000 captures with several hours of shoots of like portrait style or some sort of situational style. It's kind of saying, all right, we know we want you to have, like, we can do color correction and things like that later, but definitely get a minimum amount of exposure. Make sure you have the person kind of framed in certain ways. Still slip in your personal kind of like aesthetically, self-fulfilling, pleasurable shots. But also, if they give you clear instructions about you need an image with negative space because that may be necessary for a product tagline, a logo, things like that. Try to just, be open to the idea that if you're doing work for hire, that they may give you clear instructions about how they need shots and compositions to come through. And you should have, the technical ability and the visual eye to, when you're working with, the person or the group of people, frame that, have that electricity and that dynamics thing happening. And with photographers we work with, they deliver just amazing results. And sometimes it's not like you just get 30 selects and it's great. You need to get 1,000 pictures, and then we have photo editors to help sort that through. But for the photographers who really produce well, they become just regular collaborators for us. And their stuff is just amazing, I dig it.
And Scott, will you share with us your most important non-technical interpersonal skills that you believe the audience should know about?
I would say listen, just be able to just listen to people and feel, even if you kind of get an awkward silence, let them talk till they're done, just let them speak. And because wait to hear if they've gotten everything out. And, you know, don't always feel like you have to have the last word in terms of like talking and negotiation. Sometimes just like listen, you know, and just try to pick up on what they're telling you. And if you do need to make some of those sort of like kind of like affirmative statements back about just sort of like, okay, you talked to me for about 4 minutes straight, say back maybe the summary of what that was. So just feel that you've been able to have kind of that agreement in a way. Because when you start talking about aesthetic things, it can get very amorphous and you can start going in places. So just write it out. You know?
I just want to say one more thing about helping companies with their brands. You know, when you go out there, you may come across like an advertising agency. You may have a company that you're working directly with. Like the advertising agency, even Airbnb, they have more in-house creatives who are doing all that work that, you know, to help communicate the brand, like with a creative brief, like you were talking about. But some companies, you're working directly with the marketing director who is not a creative person. And so they don't necessarily have a creative director that can help communicate to you. So sometimes you know, in those cases, you may want to charge a fee for that if you can, to basically say, hey, I'm taking the place of your creative director. It can often be hard, but to actually be able to get a fee for that. But a lot of these brands are coming to the photographer wanting to, like, expecting you to be like that creative director, and thinking that that's your job, and it's not technically your job to like come up with the creative.
Figure out their look and their feel.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's wonderful panels.
We actually are tasked to do that quite often, truthfully.
Wonderful. Okay, so the too long didn't listen. Creative problem solving, flexibility, knowing your client, listening to your client, asking questions to get as deep as possible into the brand, trying to figure out what the essence of the brand is, and visuals a lot of times can do wonders for you, as Christine pointed out wonderfully, right? And I thought this was really profound. Getting them to say no to something is almost as powerful as getting a client to say yes to something. That was gold. I really like that one. And the idea is like you don't want to be on the shoot and then trying to figure out like what they want, because then you're doing double the work. Which then, to Nader's point, you need to make sure that they're paying you to be that creative director, because you're going to be that creative director, and a lot of times you're working with a marketing person who's not a creative director, so charge that fee. Don't be afraid to ask. Don't be afraid to ask for it, right? Yeah. And then there were, you know, like the criterion, the basic guidelines, right? The marketing brief, the photographer playbook. These are the guidelines that will allow you to be yourself as a photographer, and yet will kind of provide a little like sandbox for both of you to play in. Does that cover about everything? Did I miss anything?
Yeah.
Okay. Awesome. Thank you, panelists. Our next question, because we're coming close to time, is I would love to hear, what is the worst piece of career advice you have ever received? The worst piece of career advice you have ever received?
Usually it's the best.
We're going to do the best after, I promise.
Well, I mean, I won't say a specific occurrence, but there are times when I get advice to kind of do things like with less quality. And way back when I was, you know, in my journalism days, a photographer looked at my work and she kept saying, quality over quantity, quality over quantity. And so that's been kind of my
Guiding compass.
Yeah, exactly. And actually my first internship, when I was getting newspaper internships, I had 12 images in my portfolio. Actually, both of my I had 2 internships. 20 images, and usually they'd have 50 or 60, and every time they're like, why do you have so few images? And next thing you know, they're hiring me. So I think it's like, it's okay to have a little bit less. These days, you're being asked to, produce these quote unquote image libraries for these companies. They want so many assets to come up with, like social media. They have so many things they need to use the images for, so they're wanting so many images, and you're like breaking your back to get the images. So it's, it's still relevant, quality over quantity. You still can kind of calm them down a little bit and just be like, let's prioritize here. Let's not kind of, do things such low quality so that just so we can have the images, But with that said, someone recently told me to not, because I actually still have a physical portfolio. It's like heavy and it's like a printed book and all that. Someone told me to like dumb it down and just have almost like a newspaper quality portfolio, and I'm like, I'm sorry, I'm not going to do that. It's not probably the worst, but it's like things like that just aren't the way I do things.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I can't think of I've heard just plenty of cliches and generic platitudes, about just surviving the workplace, but nobody's ever tried to sabotage me nor give me anything that was profoundly dumb. It would probably the worst advice I've ever heard would just be people anecdotally saying that they quit a job in a way that they know they're never going to be asked back. So don't leave on bad terms and don't ghost people, because that's just weird if you just vanish from a company. So just stay professional. Don't feel as if you can just sort of just go away, because that just is strange. It's happened.
Bad advice would be, as a stylist, to a lot of people think that when you're first starting out, you have to, do things for half the price and really cut down your wages and or do twice as much for, it's kind of what Nader was saying about the quality versus quantity. And it can be really easy as a freelancer to get into a scarcity mode and worry about if you're going to have work, and what you feel like if you asked for a stipend for what you get put in as a creative director, for example, that the client's going to go away, and or if you hold your ground, the clients are going to go away, and they might, but really, it's better to not really compromise yourself. I had to learn that kind of the hard way of in the beginning, I didn't really know what to charge and what exactly, was going to be entailed. As a stylist, you get tasked to say, what's the budget? How much do you need for props for, this 5 days of shooting? And we have golf clubs, and we've got and you have to give an estimate and a quote. And I learned the hard way from getting in trouble, and I'm working a lot almost for free, and then you're like, oh gosh, okay, I need to slow it down, really analyze this, ask for the proper what it should be, find out your market rate. And then also there's another downside of if you are slashing those rates because you're a newcomer, then you're kind of undercutting the whole industry, and you're making enemies with your peers that way. So it's really not a good idea to just say yes to anything just to get some work. I think that was some advice that I had in the beginning that I learned.
I have to agree with that. When I was finishing my grad school program, for being a librarian, they basically were telling us during orientation, when you go out there into the world and you're negotiating your salaries, don't collectively lower yourselves. Feel that you are part of a whole community, and just be bold, just go for it and everything, and don't undercut and like kind of keep in fear of just depressing everything for the whole group, because we're all worth way more than what they're paying us at any given moment. So just try to get it, all right?
Awesome. Thank you, panelists. So that really turned into best advice. I really appreciate that. That's wonderful, coming from a abundance mindset. So, too long didn't listen. Quality over quantity. Less is more. Let's prioritize things to make sure that quality is there. And don't dumb down your physical portfolio, just because don't leave a job on bad terms. Don't ghost on anybody. I'm sure we've all been ghosted on, and it's super weird, and no one likes it, and I'm sure some of us are guilty of ghosting on people, and it doesn't feel good either way. Don't do it. Feel that you are part of a tribe, and don't let fear drive you in making decisions, right? You are worth much more than what you're getting paid anyway. Don't fall into scarcity mode. If you hold your ground, clients might go away. But it's better to not compromise yourself. If you hold the line and ask for market rate, not only you are doing a service for yourself, but you're empowering and doing a service to the rest of your photo community. Okay, panelists, what do you wish people would ask you more about in your world? This was a really great question that the line producer asked me one time, and I was really impressed with that, so I want to kind of bring that to you. You know, I've been asking these questions. What do you wish people would ask you more about in your photography practice or digital archiving practice?
How do you get that killer light?
What's that Instagram filter? You make it look like that.
After you.
Okay.
I gotta think about that a second.
I wish that, I think especially clients, and even people that a lot of people don't really understand what I do. It's very amorphous. And I feel like a lot of times clients think that all this stuff that I've brought to set just appears, you know, and maybe I've spent like days like begging, borrowing, stealing, making, renting, you know, packing up, caring for. And I feel like a lot of times they don't really understand that a lot more goes into it than, you know, I mean, it's my job to make it look easy, but I feel like there's a lot of behind the scenes work, and that comes from just who I am as a person and all of my life experience and all of my years of doing this, and also sometimes the people that I know, what I have access to. So I bring a lot more to set than maybe just meets the eye.
I think, you know, within the context of working with a client, I would say I wish clients asked me more about, or wanted to discuss more about than just like than just the exact like shots that they want. You know what I'm saying? Like they come to you and they say, we want 10 shots of, you know, blah blah blah, and what's the price? It's like, and that's all that's all they care about. They don't want to have a conversation about all that stuff we were talking about earlier, about the brand, about the bigger picture stuff around it. They're kind of, people are very rushed these days, and they, you know, they almost don't even want any small talk. It's like, I mean, I'm not saying all, but a lot of people that call you, they don't even really care to get to know you. You know, like they just have this kind of thing they need to know, and then they're off to their next thing. So I really appreciate when clients want to kind of deep dive a little bit more and just like really flesh through some stuff, because I consider myself the kind of person that really values that, you know, and I think it's important for any shoot that we do to actually like talk about that stuff.
It's true, and it's hard to know how to give a quote until you understand a little bit deeper about what's entailed and the kind of timing that you're going to be able to achieve it.
And I understand. I mean, if I'm going to hire somebody to do something, I'm not surprised when they send me a whole list of questions to send back. Like I think that's important. That's someone who like is doing a good job. I'm working with a designer right now, and she's doing that, and a creative consultant as well. So yeah, I think that's about it.
Do you, if I may ask a follow-up question to that, do you find that, or do you ever wonder that, okay, I'm charging this person for their time, and maybe that's the reason why they don't want to like dive in deep, or they're just like, I don't have the budget to like have this like really deep and long-term conversation with you about that.
Right. I mean, I don't mean to kind of make the similarities between like construction work necessarily, but like if you look at like a contractor, for instance, right, who's going to charge you a decent amount of money for the project, they're going to come and give you a free estimate. They're going to spend a little bit of that time ahead of time. But like somebody who's working hourly for you, yeah, the clock is ticking. So I think a lot of times people, they're a little bit of both, like they understand it. And then sometimes people are like, oh man, like for me, like when I hire some contractors, it's all about that. So I understand if people assume that when they call me, but usually like in the beginning, I'm not like charging them I'm fine with being on the phone with them for an hour. It's important, and I don't want them to feel so limited.
Yeah. Thank you. Scott.
I would just say that kind of when you're working on a gig and everything, at some point, because we're all working mostly in sort of like the digital realm and whatnot, you're going to have just like, you're going to have like, probably gigabytes, if not a terabyte worth of assets. And then when you look into your contracts and your negotiations, everybody wants to work as fast as possible, but just kind of be mindful, because this is always a pain point. You have everything captured, but then for the delivery of that stuff, if you want to just connect to the internet, it could tie up your computer for like 10 hours, depending on just speeds and upload bandwidth and how you're doing it. Are you doing it at some Starbucks cafe because you're on site, you're offset, and you're somewhere weirder, you're trying to hotspot it in? So just when you're working with your vendors and your clients, just have it where it's like, okay, we just did a full day's worth of shoot, but it could take like, reasonable, just have it understood. They can't just have it in 10 minutes. It's not like uploading a photo to Facebook or something like that. It's quite different. And sometimes for me, having to be a digital asset manager with these photographers, we understand that there's poor connection speeds in certain parts of like rural India, and we're just gonna get a hard drive in like 2 months. Or it's like, hey, you finished that shoot in New York City, but your internet package at home is kind of lousy. Just run your computer overnight. Like, you just can't tie it up for your next project right away. So just kind of do a little bit of the math. And if you can, try to have the best internet speeds possible for your delivery if you're not sending off drives in the mail.
Awesome. Thank you so much, panelists. That's all the questions for the first half of this. Let's give a round of applause for our panelists. Approximately 4 o'clock, we're going to take a 15-minute break. Studio audience, please make sure to write down your questions on the note cards, and once they're done, place them right here on this podium. And we're going to convene back at 4:15. What time are we convening back? 4:15. That's what I'm talking about. We'll see you in 15 minutes. All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. Thank you so much for hanging with us during the commercial break. So now I have the studio audience questions. We're going to go through these. And this one is very relevant, I think very poignant and applicable. I just want to remind you about the logistics. Phones on silent, no technology, bathrooms are outside. I did my best to kind of group these in buckets. So if you did get your question asked, I apologize. It is not a personal affront on you. Panelists, what advice advice would you give to a new photography grad who currently works full-time in a non-photo or creative area and is trying to break into that world?
You're always first.
I know, this is the first line of battle here. I would say to intern. It's very, very valuable to get in the door to work with somebody. And I know if you're working full-time, that can be challenging, but maybe if there's a weekend shoot, or if somebody needs help archiving their stuff, or help in the studio, maybe, volunteer your time to both get experience, you can see what's going on, and so that the people can have an idea of your skill set, your smarts, how you work, how you communicate. They'll be much more likely, even if it's not right away, maybe 6 months down the line, they'll say, oh, that person, maybe I could get them in when they have need.
Tell me the question one more time.
If I'm working full-time in a non-creative
Right.
space and I'm trying to break into photography, specifically creativity, how do I do that?
Yeah, well, I mean, that's definitely an easy question for me to answer because, I made that transition from photojournalist to commercial food and lifestyle photographer. And it's not like I just had all this extra income to, I was like, I was hungry. I had to pay the bills, and it's not like I just started shooting everything that I loved, right then and there once I got in the commercial world. So, I did, and I'm not saying this is for everyone. If you have more money saved up, I didn't have a ton, like I said, and I was like shooting events and doing headshots and occasional weddings, for a number of years, and you just gotta kind of just little by little, and invest in something more, when you can. Just like, you don't want to just get a ton of equipment and just be broke and have all this debt. But some people do it that way. Some people, they don't mind that. And some people, I don't know if they're even able to get loans from banks. I wasn't able to do that. And some people just, they may, have a spouse who is a breadwinner, so they can kind of do it a little differently. But it wasn't like that for me. So, and number two is find someone, whether you want to call it a mentor, or don't be afraid to ask questions. I'm happy to, answer questions to a certain extent, not from all of you, but, from some. If you want to email me from time to time, if there's something that's really pressing, it's important to me to, help give back because people gave it to me. I agree. Interning, assisting. If you want to, it can be sometimes hard to really get yourself in the door just as an assistant, but you just got to go network, of course. Whether it's with other assistants and or in the kind of subject matter or the industry that you're focused on as a photographer. I'll tell you right now, it is fiercely competitive. I am not even gonna sugarcoat this. If you want to become a photographer or do motion in the advertising industry, there are tons of photographers in there. I'm serious. I work on lots of bids for my jobs. I lose a ton of bids. There's so many people out there hungry. I don't want to discourage you. I would just say, no matter what, do what you love, enjoy what you do, have fun with it, and that's the other thing. Let go of sort of the time factor, because you may be telling yourself, I need to be successful. Someone told me to be you have 4 years to make it. Just do what you love and let go of that stuff. Yeah, I'm not gonna. Yeah, like I said, I'm not gonna lie. It's hard stuff. I mean, when I was a photojournalist, I got burned out, right? And I did. You know, I had a 5-day-a-week job, and I'd work. You know, I get paid for 8 hours. I'd probably work 10 just because I'm like that. Now I work 12, 14 hours sometimes. You know, a lot. I mean, I don't know. I'm just speaking for myself. To like when you have your own business, you don't just shoot, you know. I mean, maybe at some point you can have a studio manager. You know, some photographers now, they'll have a studio manager, they'll have a producer, they'll have a retoucher, all in-house. There aren't a ton of people like that. And also you have a rep that's helping you, that can help you with your estimating and all that, and negotiating with clients. I have a rep who helps me with that, but it's still, you know, there's still so much other work. I mean, your bookkeeping, if you want to find that out, like I don't have a bookkeeper, you know, that's just one of those costs, so that I choose to do myself. But yeah, I'm sure there's more, but that's probably the gist of it.
And I mentioned interning because I was assuming this is a path to assisting. Assisting is really, really valuable. You can do it for quite a few years. You learn so much. I mean, photo assistants, they really learn a lot. But assisting for a lot of different people. And it is a mentorship industry. And like there is one school for stylists back east. I don't even know if it's still around, but really it's something that is learned on the job by assisting. And so it's not really a great idea to go in and approach a stylist and say, I want to be a stylist. Here's my portfolio. Because then you're saying, I want to be your competition. You really should approach and say, like, I want to learn from you. I want to, you know, I really am interested in assisting. I'm interested in this industry. And then after a reasonable amount of time, I mean, you can earn a good living as an assistant. And if you get, actually right now there's a shortage of assistants. If you get in with one of us, we'll probably recommend you to the next one, to the next one, to the next one, and you'll be booked all the time.
And just another thing on assistants, a lot of times when I'm, like, say I'll have someone an assistant who works with me regularly, and you know, they're freelancers, so they're not obligated to work with me, they're busy a lot, and I'll often ask them a recommendation. And that's, so if you're not, like, getting to know other assistants, they're gonna recommend you to a photographer, because we ask, believe me, there's, you know, we have lots of jobs and we can't always fill the space. So like I get a lot of people approaching me saying, hey, can I assist for you? And I'm like, I'm more prone to hire you if one of my colleagues or one of my assistants has recommended you. And not to like give a plug for it, but I'm one of the board members for APA. I don't know if any of you know APA. It's American Photographic Artists. It's one of the trade associations in the city. And we have events constantly, and it's a really good way. We just started this thing called SET, which is a monthly event where you get we get around in a circle and just talk about all the issues that we're going through. And it's a great place to kind of meet other people, other assistants, photographers, and like really get to know the community of like really good photographers that are going there. So I highly recommend that. And I have been with APA since I got like into commercial photography. I like just joined right up, and it's helped me along. Really, like it's been really valuable. And I'm not just saying that to plug it. Like I really think it's a great resource. Sorry, that went a little long.
No, it's a great idea. Like aside from just having some sort of membership into circles where even if you're not doing it day to day, you're still like you're still a member of the community, of course. And even if let's say full time you're working something. Before I went into grad school and I was just trying to build up my own portfolio for like my package to say like, hey, let me into your school, let me do this program. I was working full time, just basically doing like book photo production work. But at night, 3 days a week, I was doing just volunteer work at this nonprofit where I was helping them produce an annual book awards contest at the Commonwealth Club of California. So like, it was like sacrificing those evenings, but doing like, productive stuff. It just like, it helps to just build up your skill set. You just get to meet people. And just like if you're able to budget the energy and you're able to pull it off, I was lucky that where I worked full time on my way back to the BART station, that's where the Commonwealth Club was located. So it was pretty convenient to do both. But it was pretty tiring for 3 years doing that. But at the same time, make sure that you just have like sort of a cohesive sort of like a website, an email address, a Twitter handle or Instagram handle that has like more or less like the same sort of URL or the same sort of phrasing. So if anybody needed to ever contact you, you don't seem fractured in any way. That it just makes sense where it's like your website is the same as your everything else. And just have that online portfolio just ready at all times for people to discover you and try to reach out to you. So that's always there to be sort of like, your spotlight and champion.
Thank you, panelists. Too long didn't listen. Be hungry, but not thirsty. Shooting events, do headshots, occasional weddings, little by little, invest in some more equipment, slow and steady wins the race, shoot some, make some money, invest in the craft, build it out some more. Don't be afraid to ask questions of industry professionals. Seek a mentor. Assist on shoots. Getting in the door on the shoots is hard, but if you network with other assistants or industry-specific subject matter experts, that will help. It is super duper competitive. It's super duper competitive. Do what you love, have fun and play, and practice non-attachment, aka let go of results. Right?
And time.
And time, of course. Yeah. Once you have the money to get a rep, but there's still so much work to do. Do a great job on any job that you get, so you can get referrals and recommendations. Or if you have someone who's going to go to bat for you, it is a game changer. Look into the American Photographic Artists. Is that correct? Is it?
Yeah.
It's a monthly event where photographic artists circle up and discuss challenges and network, and you meet your tribe and community, which I cannot emphasize enough. Do some volunteer work. It'll help you build your skill set, meet people, but make sure that you're budgeting your energy and do not give up before the miracle. And on a more logistical side, have a website, email address, Twitter, Instagram with the same branding and phrasing to not seem fractured and make it easy for people to find you. And have it ready at any moment in time so people can reach out to you and discover you. Did I miss anything? All right. Awesome. Thank you, panelists. I believe you kind of touched on this. How do you find your jobs as a freelancer, referrals and recommendations? Is that the main? Usually that's what I heard from that previous one. If there's more you want to add to that, I want to give some space for it.
I mean, it's as a photographer, marketing is kind of, I've always thought of it as you have to put it out there in so many different places because you don't really know where it's going to come from. So yeah, websites, social media. I'm in something called Workbook, which is a source book that they send out to all the ad agencies, and there are a number of different source books, and they're quite a bit of money to be in. And they host portfolio reviews, where you can meet face to face. I mean, some people will call up the agencies and say, hey, can I show you my portfolio? That can be hard. It can be very hard, but you know what? I mean, the main thing is you have to put yourself out there. You have to get out of your comfort zone. It's not going to be easy, but I'm telling you, I've always been a big believer in telling, I mean, it's a little corny, but tell the universe what you want. So, like, show it what you want by acting in that direction, and then you're gonna get rejected, but it's gonna pay off. It's something's, and it may not be exactly what you wanted, but it may be something in that realm. That's how it's always worked for me.
Wonderful. Scott, you see anything else to add?
I get all Yeah, I have my website, and usually it's just, I probably get about 5% of my work from people just Googling and finding my website. Those are usually people from other cities. But locally, it's just, there's not really that many of us, so it's kind of just word of mouth.
I have my 9 to 5.
Yes.
Just sort of boring, if not shackled in that way.
You're anything but boring, Scott Davis. I know.
Well, sorry, did you go straight to Airbnb from your past job?
Yeah.
Or were you kind of job searching?
I was fortunate enough where I was, of course, I did have very much with how when I went into grad school, it was right when the economy just completely tanked. So I was fortunate that I was sort of out of the job market for about a year, for about 10 months when I was just completely focused on my studies. And then I entered what you would call now just sort of the kind of the contractor freelancer world. And in California, at least, you are held to limits of say, whether it's company policy or state limits of 18 months at a time. So there are, and it's not necessarily the first day you start, you're guaranteed that stretch of work. So when I first got out of grad school, I was just kind of as a freelance digital asset manager contractor, kind of doing things for an 18-month stretch, take a break, do something else. And then I did end up getting sort of normal, just full-time jobs. And then prior to my current role with Airbnb, I had just basically gone from being I was a contractor at Walmart, and I had been there for about a year, and it was going to be well, what do I do next? And then at Airbnb, I did enter in as a contractor, and after about a year, I was fortunate enough to become a full-time employee. But there were those stretches where it was I was extended for 1 month at a time with 3 days notice. So you do have to manage and be just resilient to think, do everything you can, learn what you can, because these jobs at times are never guaranteed. But while you're there, you do have opportunities to just befriend everybody on LinkedIn and just start to grow that network and what have you. And just try to feel be the positive force that's in there, be aware of other people who are maybe in a similar situation. And if you are lucky enough to then get better job security, be a champion for everybody else and be supportive for them if they are in that sort of dynamic with the company or your team dynamic, because you want everybody to bring their best every day.
How do you do that when you're feeling exhausted, on the days, because you talk about energy, right? And I think it's a real thing in this area. And I applaud you for what you just said about bringing your best every day. What are some tips that you would share with the studio audience about okay, today, I don't know if I can necessarily bring my best, and so maybe I do this thing, and then it helps me ease into being my best.
For me personally, I just have massive OCD complex issues, so it's almost binary where I just have to work and hold myself to that standard. Again, I've also just for the reality of things, when the economy was really bad in 2008 to 2010, seeing just so many people go through just tough situations, I just felt as if no matter what, I will persevere, and I'm always going to be just exemplary and be the person that is indispensable anywhere I end up. And so far I've been fortunate where I've either just been able to control where I've been able to work next and been able to just win over hearts and minds and make it become bona fide where I currently am. And so it's just whether you have to just either have to do meditation, anything for wellness and what have you. I find instrumental ambient music to be very restful and calm. Basically, Brian Eno's Thursday Afternoon, it's 47 minutes of just light keyboard taps. That keeps me chill AF all the day through.
What was that all called? Brian Eno's what?
Thursday Afternoon.
You play it at work?
Headphones. Noise canceling if you can.
Awesome. Awesome. Thank you, panelists. Okay. Have to cast a very wide net in order to catch some fish, right? There's a workbook concept. So it's a source book that they send out to agencies. Costs a lot of money. They also hold portfolio reviews. Another hard step would be to just call up agencies and say, hey, I want to work for you. The major thing that I was hearing is step out your comfort zone and into the growth zone and manifest what you want by your actions. It will pay off eventually. It may not be exactly what you wanted, and sometimes it could be even better than you could ever imagine. Word of mouth, grow the network at every gig, model excellence, be supportive of your teammates and organization, staying positive in what you're trying to do your best to win over hearts and minds. Brian Eno's Thursday afternoon. Okay. Thank you so much. Our next question from the studio audience is, what resources do you utilize to find market rates? If, for example, peers, customers, or whatever aren't willing to share that information with you. What resources do you utilize to figure out market rate?
Just ask them. How's the that for your industry?
Peers. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's really peers.
I feel like, when I was in the restaurant world, I still shoot some restaurants every now and then, but I shot so many restaurants that it's more about the market rates, is that what you're saying?
Yeah, I'm trying to figure out how much when they say how much do you charge, what is the response, and what resources do I use to go to find that number?
Well, obviously you can ask other photographers, right? A lot of times other photographers won't tell you that because they're hush-hush. They don't want to, we're in competition. Sometimes they'll help you out to give you a sense, but it can differ depending upon the kind of industry you're in and the kind of client you're working with. I work with smaller businesses. I don't expect them to kind of pay me the same kind of rates as a larger corporation that wants, a certain amount of rights to use images in lots of different places. So that's understandable. And but within the restaurant industry, I shot so many restaurants that I learned so much of the vocabulary and the needs of restaurants. And a lot of times they'll tell you their budgets, and it's pretty common practice. I don't know if it's always the best practice because you may be able to make more money if you just, own it and know that that's what your worth is. But with a lot of the larger shoots, larger productions, the ad agency's coming to you and saying, we have this amount of money and what can you do for us? And I oftentimes will, obviously know how much it costs to produce a production, but part of that first discussion I'm having with clients is what is your budget? And a lot of people are afraid to ask that question. But you just have to, after a while, it's hard to come out, but you just start asking it, and it just becomes normal, and you realize that those clients are used to that. You know what I'm saying? But after a while, you'll start to see there's some lots of different kind of rates or whatever you want to call them that are start to become pretty consistent. These days, when clients are asking, there's your kind of photography fee, but then there's also licensing, which is a whole kind of thing to understand about a lot of these commercial shoots. You're not just charging them to show up and take the picture. You're basing your rates on what they're going to do with the images, right? And that's a lot of clients that maybe are new to the business don't understand. They're like, you're charging me? I thought you're just going to charge me to show up and take the pictures, and then I own all the images, right? It's like, no, there's a pricing model which is standard in professional photography, that is based upon what they're using the images for. And people get a little confused because they don't think that photographers sometimes use the same kind of standards as like the motion picture industry or music, but it's virtually the same. I think that's the gist of it.
Thank you, panelists. Let's see.
Did you?
You covered. Well, no, like all I would say is in terms of rates and whatnot, of course, like for somebody, if your client was as big as Airbnb, depending on the scale and scope of the shoot, whether this is something that is, we're having an event happening on site, they just need somebody to take some photo snaps, like, you know, for like 2 hours of like some social mixer, that's going to be a certain rate, and that's just meant for internal purposes only. It's not even meant for like any sort of marketing publicity stuff. It's just event capture. Versus the idea, because everything, especially when it's digital born, can be repurposed and made into a new expression of anything. It could become an Instagram post, it can become a billboard, it can become whatever it is. So just pay attention to all of your service of work agreements, all of your MSAs about for what you're capturing, what does that potentially become? And there's all that sort of legalese. Just get familiar with it, because there could be some vague phrasing that's just, that they would argue is a catch-all for anything possible. And, you know, there are contracts that are as detailed as photographer will take, you know, will capture a minimum 2,000 images a day for 5 days, but from the entire shoot, only 60 images get the selection for marketing purposes, and then anything else beyond that, you just have a whole series of fees about what they would, like the vendor, like for us Airbnb, what we would have to pay to unlock that stuff. And you know, and you enter into that stuff in agreement, just knowing that's what it is. And if you're able to negotiate that, your rep can do it for you, or if you can just represent yourself and you've like read every NOLO press book that there is about contracts and codifying it, you know, just protect yourself, because especially nowadays, if things get used incorrectly out there in the digital space, once it's out there, it's hard to regulate it, and it could be costly, if not almost counterintuitive, to try to fight it or something like that. We do our best as a creative department to honor all contracts and agreements, because we don't want to get into trouble. We don't want to be considered a bad player, you know, in the creative space when we work with photographers directly, with creative agencies, and everything else. And we just do our due diligence to follow all the legal documents to make sure that's, you know, included and honored with what we do.
Okay. Wonderful. Quick recap: peers, top of industry subject matter experts. Asking clients straight up, what is your budget? It's a muscle to be developed, and it will become normal eventually over time. And then make sure you're paying attention to service work agreements and thinking about what you're capturing and what it might become later on. Thank you, panelists. Next question.
I have one thing to say
I'm sorry.
about the rates. There are often times where people will ask you to work for free, and that seems really strange and counterintuitive, but there are times when it can actually be beneficial. In the beginning of my career, I did a lot of testing with other photographers where you get together and you work together and you figure out, you know, maybe you have a creative idea, you figure out your lighting, you know, what you want to do, you get a chance to sort of try it out with each other before you're on a big shoot for a client. And you see how you work together, you get to have ideas. Sometimes those things are great and they make it into the portfolio, and sometimes they're just like, oh no, that was a bad idea. But it can be valuable. And then the second time that working for free can be, I mean, magazines are almost dead now, but magazines have very, very low budgets, but it can be great exposure and publicity. So if you're going to do something for a really low rate, one, I would make sure and let them know, like, I don't usually work for this, but I'm willing to do it because you're giving me creative freedom. or I'm going to get this exposure by being in your publication, or something like that. Just make sure that there is some kind of compensation, and that way you're not really destroying the industry standard. You're doing it for a reason, and oftentimes that's a really good publicity.
I still test all the time,
Yeah.
as much as I can.
I still do it as well.
You do? Okay.
See you Wednesday.
All right, thank you, panelists. So we have about 10 more minutes, and got a couple really interesting questions that I want to see if we can get to as many of them as possible. Could you please share with the studio audience, from your perspective, what do you feel like is the number one thing employers or clients are looking for? And then there's like education, your portfolio, your network, etc.
I find clients nowadays, they really want to be sure. There's a little bit of almost insecurity. Like they want to see from my part of the job, they want to see all the things that you're going to be bringing to set. They want to know. Like if they haven't worked with me before, it's usually, these are like the first time clients that I haven't worked with before. They need, more communication ahead of time. And they really want you to show them what you're going to do and your ideas in a Pinterest board, or sending them images, and that it can take like a whole extra day that you're not necessarily paid for. Once you work with them once, and they know who you are and what you bring, then they don't even care anymore. They're like, okay, we know. But I think in the beginning, it's, there's a lot of money at stake, and there's a lot, it's a big, especially for bigger productions. So, you need like a little bit more of a relationship and a back and forth in the beginning.
There are so many things that you can't really predict that the client that's gonna make a difference in whether the client is gonna hire you or not. And so I would say part of it is out of your control. But at the same time, I would say if some of the most successful photographers, what the clients are looking for is a couple things. One is their imagery obviously is first and foremost. If it's so unbelievably different and so in touch with whatever kind of creative they're looking for, some people are just, you see them, they're just like so different from everybody else, and it's like really, you're like, how the heck did they even like get so good, I would say so that, but then also a big part is, when the creative call, when you're actually this is big in the ad agency world, where you're on the phone with, say, a rep, and then there's like the art producer, and then there's the creative director, and then maybe even the client is in the room, and they're all just sitting there kind of measuring you up. And, it's your chance to kind of be as much yourself. They want to see that you're, whatever it is, like fun, easy to work with, easy to talk to. You really think about the solutions. They're also wanting to kind of, in a way, see that you understand their brand, and you're maybe even echoing a lot of those brand, like the words that they use. You know what I'm saying?
And that you have a vision.
Yes.
That you're going to guide this boat.
Yeah.
That you're going to. I think oftentimes, that we're hired because we have a certain look and a certain essence to him, to his photographs, me to my styling, and so, hopefully people are coming to us because they're like, yes, we want you, and bring more of what you bring. But sometimes they'll be wanting us to go in a different direction, and so I think, giving them that confidence that you're capable of taking this boat where they envision it going.
Yeah. Yeah. And in terms of like a personal brand perspective, you can kind of think about like the body of work that you create and how kind of focused you want it to be. Where like if you just go start to look at other photographers, in a way you should just focus on yourself. But I like looking at other photographers for inspiration, and you'll see in terms of the market, some people are, not everyone is just like, I only shoot, phones, and that's my whole portfolio. Like, they may be a product photographer, and then they'll kind of, branch out a little bit from there. But some people brand themselves on just their style. They shoot all kinds of subject matter, but it's more of their style. And then some people are more like, I'm a food photographer, and I only shoot in studio,
It is good to know your strengths and then work with them and really showcase that.
Mm-hmm.
Anecdotally, I would share that we're so lucky that for our department we have weekly creative reviews where people are showing work in progress, or sometimes they bring in the creators who are like photographers who are like we're working with on certain projects, things in the past or just like in general. And whenever we have photographers come in, or the actual creators are just talking about their work, they're able to just they're comfortable talking about what their craft is. They have either, talking points, or they know how to shape a story around it. And they have it where, they just have that element of inspiration, kind of the spark of things that, that they're excited about. In that they're able to just also handle a back and forth. And even if you could have somebody like a marketeer in the room who kind of can be kind of blunt and maybe ostensibly harsh, but also how can the creator handle their composure when asked something that could be in contradiction to maybe what they're aesthetically usually lean towards. And that's something where the people who seem to be the best can just sort of handle that in the moment, and they understand that the creative process could be pretty disruptive at times, and egos get strained and whatnot. But just if you haven't done creative reviews for your own work and what you feel this is what you do, and someone says, I love this, but can you just do it completely this way? Is that something where you'll get outraged, or do you think, I can't just do it that way? You have the technical ability to do it, and you just get that's an aesthetic. It may not be entirely your own, but maybe the compromise in the end is something that does actually work out, or was what you had in mind all along, So be prepared for stuff like that.
Well, and in addition, to add to that, and I might have said it before, but the more you've worked on that particular similar solution with other clients, the more that you can bring to the table to help sort of them trust that you're going to kind of, Christine said, what was the boat analogy?
Drive
the boat, when you've done that, a similar shoot like that numerous times, it's going to be an easy kind of sell. They're just obviously you don't want to make them think they don't want to hire you because they're working with all their competitors, and it helps a ton when you've done similar things a lot.
Wonderful panelists. Wonderful. All right, recap. Clients want certainty. For the first timers, sometimes they need a little bit more hand holding. Show them what your value add is: ideas, mood board, images, enthusiasm. And once they know who you are and what you bring, it won't require as much legwork. Technical prowess, so imagery is first and foremost. You're striving to make them say, how did they do that? How did they make that happen? When you're on a creative call and all the stakeholders are sizing you up, it's your chance to be yourself. Fun, easy to work with, solutions oriented, you understand their brand, you're echoing, literally using the same words that they're using. You need to have a vision. right? We all have superpower, we have strengths that you need to lean into, right? So people come to you because you have a certain look, right? So make sure you bring what you're bringing and present it with strength and take people on this boat to where they want to go. I really like, Scott, what you were saying about making sure you have a story that kind of supports and strengthens your vision for the creative work that you're doing. And then lastly, do creative reviews to strengthen your feedback game, right? Be able to handle a back and forth. Can the creator be composed even when they're being asked to move away from what they're aesthetically predisposed to? That was excellent. All right, we are at time, so I'm going to ask one really quick, super quick question for Mr. Scott Davis. What are the tools you use most at your work? Technical tools.
Pretty much Photoshop every day is just necessary, but my expertise is in just a digital asset management platform. It's where the assets go in, it's where all the magic happens, and eventually controlled distribution and all the legal tracking for it. And I'll stop myself there.
Awesome. Let's make some noise for it. Thank you so much. This has been Workforce Wednesday, Careers in Photography. My name is Arya Zarrinkelk. Thank you so much, panelists, for coming and sharing your knowledge.